My name is Clyde McKenrick. I was born in Clinton, Iowa. I grew up on a farm, and I graduated from a consolidated high school. And I also did a year and a half in college at Cornell College in Cedar Rapids. After that, I came home and worked on the farm, on a farm, for about, I came home in early April from college. And then I worked on the farm, until the following March. And I went to work in Clinton at that time at a sash and door factory. And I became an inventory control clerk. And my typing experience was what put me there. And I had been there, that was in 1948. And in 1952, I was drafted. And I went into the service. I was drafted from Clinton, Iowa, and I took my swearing-in ceremony in Des Moines, and then I went to Camp Crowder, Missouri, where I took my training, or the tests that I had to take, and they sent me then to Camp Gordon, Georgia. I was to go down there and become a cryptographer. I assume it was because of my typing skills that got me that far. And when I got to Georgia, I went through crypto school, and then we were to be assigned to overseas duty. Now, some of my classmates in crypto class went to Europe, but there were 5 of us in my class there. I and 4 other of my soldier buddies were sent to Korea. We were to go to Korea. All 5 of us were sent to the same base in Korea. By the time we got there, we had been through Japan, and when we went over on the boat, and we landed in Yokohama, then took the train to Iwakuni Air Base in Japan, then flew from there to Kimpo. And I have it written down there that landing at Kimpo was a real experience, because the pilots, I think, did it on purpose. They headed right into some of the buildings, and you could see the shell marks and everything. And for us farm kids, it was quite an experience. I got sent, or all 5 of us, got sent over to the 931st Engineer Aviation Group, which is in lack of a better word, a bastard outfit, because we were Army, but we were attached to the Air Force. We were an engineering group, but we were crypto people. We were an engineering group. So when we got to 931st, all 5 of us were interviewed individually. I was selected to stay at headquarters. The other 4 were parceled out to the 4 battalions that were under us at different airfields. So that's where we were. And I was crypto, of course, but I did not do any crypto work. In fact, the 5 of us all 5 of us became clerks. I was a personnel clerk at headquarters. One of the guys was a postal clerk at battalion headquarters. One of them was a courier, and one was a motor clerk. I mean, he was with the motor pool, but all he did was he was clerical. And the same way with the last guy, he was a cleric. He was company clerk. And so all 5 of us, though we went through crypto school, none of us became crypto operators. The radio operators that were with our units were the crypto people because it was just the basic crypto machine that we had. And I was there for 11 months and 3 weeks. And when we went to return to the States, I still had time to go. That was in July, and I had time to go till October before I could be discharged. And so I was assigned to another air base, and I became a legal clerk at this air base for the company the battalion that I was with at that time. And if I remember correctly, it was 435th. I can't swear by it, but I think that's what it was. And I was the legal clerk there. I did not take shorthand, but the captain in charge said, "That's all right, Clyde." He says, if you can't get it down in longhand, we'll have him repeat it. So I was there for I got down there in the first part of August, early August, and I was discharged in early October, and I had about 4 trials a week that I had to take testimony in, but I took it in longhand and then went back and typed it. And the captain that I had in Korea happened to come by in early September. He had been rotated back, and he was in another unit in that place. He happened to come in to talk to the officer in charge where we were, and he walked by my desk, turned around, come back, shook my hand, and said, "When are you scheduled for discharge?" And I told him. And he says, "I tell you what, re-up, you'll come over to my unit and you'll be a sergeant." And I said, "Sir, I can't do that." Because I says, "I want to get out." He says, "Okay, I gave you the chance." And he turned around and walked away. And then I worked there until the early part of October when I was discharged.
Can you explain for younger generations who will watch this about the crypto, what does that mean?
It's cryptography, coding, to be able to communicate in code between units. And there were several different machines that you would use, like if you look in the newspaper, there's a cryptogram in some of the papers. I do those every day. I keep track of that, but that's what a cryptographer does, is he encodes and decodes and of what people want to what one unit wants to send to another unit, and so that they have complete communication without being intercepted by the enemy. So that's what I did. When I was coming home, between the time I had graduated from crypto school till I was being sent overseas, I had my leave of absence. So I went down to the place where I had been working, and I walked into personnel so I could sign in, so I could get to the other places and talk to the people that I had worked with there. The person who was the personnel director saw me walk through the door. He came out, grabbed me by the arm, took me in his office, closed the door, and said, "What kind of trouble are you in?" And I looked at him and I says, "I don't think I'm in any trouble." He says, "The FBI was in here asking questions about you. What kind of trouble are you in?" And I said, I laughed at him, and I says, his name was Paul, and I says, "Paul," I says, "I have a security clearance." And he sat down real hard in his chair, and he says, I couldn't get out of my mind, what did he possibly do? He says, I couldn't see you doing anything that would get you into that kind of trouble. So that was one of my stories. Another one that I think is rather interesting is when we were overseas, we had our barracks was alphabetized, all down one side and down the other. And we had a couple of people with the same last name. And one was a courier for us, and one was a mechanic in the motor pool. They were right side by side. They had the same last name. One was white and one was colored. They came from the same town. They had the same father. They were half-brothers. They knew that they were half-brothers. They had never talked to each other because their mothers had raised them separately. And the one would not come into the barracks until the other one had either gone or gone to sleep. Then he would come in and go to bed. And then he would usually get up early in the morning and get out of there until one time, well, about a week after this started, Paul, the white soldier, woke up when Steve came in, and he got up out of bed, and he says, "Steve, I know you are my half-brother." He says, "We had no control over what our father did, but we can at least be civil to each other." And so they were. They were best buddies after that. And that's one of the stories that I have, that I think an awful lot of. I used to go into Seoul once a month because of my position as a clerk. I had to go in and get the company payroll. Well, I got the enlisted payroll. And the lieutenant, who was my boss at that point, he rode along in the Jeep with us, and he would get the officers' payroll. And then we would come back from Seoul and make the distribution. But it was interesting, the fact that the lieutenant would sit behind. I would sit next to the driver. The driver would have a pistol. I would be sitting there with an M1. The lieutenant behind me was sitting there with a carbine. Why? Only because we were carrying script, because they didn't want us to be robbed. Otherwise, did that for 11 months, once a month.
So can you kind of paint me a picture? What was that? What was your job like? What did you see?
What did I see? What I did over there was I was enlisted clerk, and any of the enlisted people that were being brought into our units would come to the headquarters unit, was where I was stationed. They would come in there, and we would determine which one of our subunits they would go to. That's another story that I've got that I can tell. In my duties there, I was instructed to go through the Form 20s of these soldiers and determine where they would be best situated, because I knew what each of the battalions needed, because they had listed what they needed. And we were losing our master sergeant, who was our mess sergeant. We were losing him. He was being transferred back to the States. I mean, his time was up. And I happened to look through at the Form 20s of these corporals and privates and corporals and sergeants that were coming through, and I found a corporal from Minneapolis, and his civilian duties had been he grew up working in his dad's bakery. Well, I called him in, sat him down, and I said, I see here that you used to work in a bakery. He says, what did you do there? He says, I did everything. My dad was getting older, and he was going to turn it over to me. He says, it'll be mine when I get back. And I said, we're losing our mess sergeant. Would you be interested? And he looked at me, and he says, man, would I ever. I would get out of the motor pool, wouldn't I? And I said, yes, you would. He says, I'll take it. And so he came in, took over the mess sergeant's duties. He had time to spend about a week with the mess sergeant, get it located there. A week later, he came to the captain of the company there, and he said, sir, he said, if the enlisted men will do without sugar in their coffee at the 10 o'clock coffee hour, he says they can have cake or cookies with their coffee. And Lieutenant looked up at him, he says, you mean you could make cake and cookies if they don't have sugar in their coffee? The sergeant or the corporal said, yes. He says, the officers will do without their sugar too. And so we all had coffee and cookies before, cake and cookies, then after that. But that's one of the things that you find out when you look at a Form 20 and you see what they did in civilian life. And he was a great cook. I mean, we had, the cakes that he would make, it was just, of course he used the big pans, but they melt in your mouth. At least they did over there.
Mm-hmm. You said you were drafted. What did that feel like to be drafted? Or
well, the draft was in effect, and I remember on it was December 7th, 1951, that I got my first notice. My friends and neighbors had decided that I should be a soldier, or I should be in the service, and therefore I would go to Des Moines for a physical on, I don't know, it was the 20th of December, and so I did. And then on the 7th of January, in 2 weeks, I was back out in Des Moines being inducted into the service. So it didn't take long to get me in.
Before you went, what did you know about Korea? What did you think about the war at the time?
Well, at the time, I was reading the newspapers and all that, and I was married, and I used to think, oh, what a horrible, that's the best word I can use. What a horrible situation. And I had friends, I had family, relatives that had been there earlier. And so, I knew that Korea was there. And when I got my notice, for my draft notice, it didn't surprise me because I was that age. And I was 21. 22. Which was it? Yeah, 22. And so I knew that I was eligible to go. It didn't surprise me. And I didn't try to get out of it either. I didn't go to Canada. And so otherwise, I went because I was called to do it. I mean, it was just, that was what we did.
When you got there, what did it look like? What was it like?
When we went over by boat. And the boat we were on there was numerous of us that were in one section that were both Army, Air Force, Navy. I mean, we were a varied group. The rest of the ship was all Marines. Those poor buggers had to stand out on the deck every day with their rifles and do calisthenics and all of that stuff. Then they had to go back in and take the salt air out of their weapons. And we felt so sorry for them. We were, those of us that were in that one group, the Air Force, the Navy, the Army people, we were on KP mostly. And we did most of the Marines were there training. We weren't. We were there actually being transported, but we did the stuff that had to be done. Mop the latrines, and I was fortunate. I was assigned to what they call dry stores. So, I mean, that was where all of the candy, cake mixes, cookies, and stuff was stored that would go into the galley. And that's what I worked on for the 11 days that we were aboard ship. Of the guys that were in my unit and worked in the personnel office that I was in, we have one guy left, and he's in a nursing home in Chicago. And that's a story outside of the military that I won't get into here.
What kind of friendships or camaraderie did you build through the service? Very
much. This fellow that's in the nursing home in Chicago right now, he sat right next to me in a desk right next to me. He too was a typist. He knew shorthand. I didn't, but he was the officer's clerk. I was the enlisted clerk. And we got along famously. We come home, transferred back here. I got sent to Fort Walters by Fort Worth. And he was sent, I think, to Chanute Field, where he was released from the service. About a year and a half later, my wife's cousin was getting married. So she was in Chicago, and her boyfriend was in Chicago, and they were coming out, and we were going to meet, talk to them. We were going to meet him because we knew the cousin, and we got to the house. I walked in, and here's my buddy. He's the best man. And we didn't know it. Neither one of us knew that the other one was going to be there. And it was just a real, and I've kept in contact with him ever since. But he and my wife's cousin's husband were big buddies, and they communicate a lot. And so of all of the people that I was over there, he's the only one that's left that I know of, that I ever kept in contact with.
What was it like to come back? What was it like to transition?
It wasn't too hard because I had been 3 months in Texas. It wasn't as though I was coming back out of combat zone. It was just a military base. And it was a military base. The radio operator that we had in Korea was from that town. And he wrote his folks that I was being transferred there. And why don't you help him find a place to stay? They did. They came and to where they came out to the base where I was, Walters Air Force Base, and talked to me. And they said, you know, Marvin told us that you were coming. Why didn't you come down to the they had a store in downtown Walters. And why didn't you come to the store? Well, we figured we ought to get settled first. Well, where are you at? They said that's too expensive. So they said, we'll see about getting you a little cheaper place. And they did. They got us a 3-bedroom apartment instead of a 5-bedroom, or a 3-room apartment instead of a 5-room apartment. And it was about half of what the other was. He even made sure that the people that had the 5-room apartment knew that we were going to be moving out, and we could move out at any time and we'd get our money back. So that's one of the advantages of knowing some people, I guess. And, but otherwise, there was nothing exceptional about my service, other than I found I had some good friends, and found some good friends.
And have you had a chance to revisit Korea at all since
No.
then?
No. I don't. It's when the Korea Reborn book just dumbfounded me to think that South Korea has grown so much. And when we went to the 60th anniversary there in Chicago, to see the Korean people have, I don't want to say matured, but grown so much. It's beautiful. And I think it's wonderful. But no, I haven't. I've been on the honor flight, and I was impressed with that. But I have not been to Korea again. I don't know as I really want to. I like to remember what I saw there, and then I can look at the book and see what a tremendous job they've done. And otherwise, I've not really made any. I have no real desire, I don't think, to go to Korea.
How does it feel now as you get to see the book and where they've come? How does it feel to have been a part of that way back?
Oh, it's unbelievable to see how far they have grown. It's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. I mean, I remember seeing the people walking down the road with their basket of stuff on their head, and then looking across the road at the huts that are over there and seeing the fish drying on the roof, on the thatched roof. I mean, it's just, that's not there anymore. And it's wonderful. I think it's great. I'm very glad that the U.S. had the opportunity to go in and assist the South Koreans in defending themselves against communism.
Your time in the service, how has that impacted your life?
It made me appreciate, I think, what I had here more. I didn't take it for granted after that.
Was there anything that you would like to impart to the younger generation or wisdom that you feel like you've gained?
All I can say is, if you're free, fight to stay free.
How has, your time in the service, how has it made you feel towards war or military service?
I appreciate military service immensely. War is a necessity at times. I don't like it, but war is a necessity at times. We must stand firm if we intend to remain free, because there's too many, I don't want to call them people, but too many individuals that want to take freedom away from us. And I hope they never succeed. They haven't yet.